Once upon a time, in a peaceful village nestled between the hills, there lived a little girl named Amma. She was only 5 years old, but already had a heart full of love. Her life was simple, yet rich with happiness, all thanks to her devoted mother, Adwoa. Amma adored her mother more than anything in the world. Every morning, Adwoa would wake early to prepare Amma's favorite porridge, filling the air with the comforting scent of freshly baked bread. They would sit together, laughing as they ate, and Adwoa would often share stories from her childhood, teaching Amma the wisdom of their ancestors. Amma's world was filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of her mother's care. The bond between them was unbreakable, and the two of them were inseparable. In the evenings, after a day of school and play, Amma would sit by her mother's side, eyes wide with wonder, as Adwoa told tales under the soft glow of the moon. It was during these moments that Amma felt truly special, her heart swelling with affection for the woman who filled her life with joy. But on this particular morning, Amma could not have known that her world was about to change forever. The sun rose like any other day, casting golden beams across the village, and Amma skipped off to school, her heart light and her laughter echoing down the dirt paths. Her teacher greeted her with a smile as she took her seat in the small classroom filled with children eager to learn. The day passed quickly, as it always did, with Amma's bright eyes focused on her lessons. Little did she know, the events that unfolded in the afternoon would rip the heart out of her peaceful existence. It began with a visit from the village head, a stern and serious man who often handled important matters in the community. He entered Amma's classroom, his face set in a somber expression. Amma's chest tightened with an unfamiliar unease. The teacher spoke quietly to the head, then turned to the class, gesturing for Amma to come forward. Amma followed him, confused and unsure of what was happening. As they walked through the village, Amma noticed that something was different. The usual chatter of her friends, the bustling of the market, and the laughter of children playing had all faded. Instead, a heavy silence seemed to hang over the village. They arrived at the village head's hut, where her father, Kwame, stood alone, staring out over the hills, his back turned to her. Amma's small feet hesitated as she stepped into the hut, her eyes searching for some clue as to why her father was here. Kwame turned slowly when he heard her enter. His eyes, usually filled with warmth, were now dark and hollow. His face was tense, and his voice, when he spoke, was low, almost lifeless. "Amma," he began, his words heavy. "Your mother, she had an accident. She has returned to the ancestors." Amma's world seemed to stop. Her breath caught in her throat, and she looked at him, expecting him to say something else. But his words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "What do you mean, Papa?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, as tears began to fill her wide eyes. She couldn't understand. The idea that her mother, the one who always held her close and made her feel safe, was gone forever, seemed impossible. Have you ever faced a moment that turned your world upside down? Amma's story shows us how even in the darkest times, hope and courage can light the way. Keep watching to see how Amma's journey unfolds. Kwame's gaze fell to the floor. He couldn't meet her eyes. "She's gone, my child," he whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of the words. He turned and walked away, leaving Amma standing there, her heart shattered. Amma's tiny body felt numb as she stood in the center of the hut. The world outside seemed to blur as the words continued to echo in her mind. "She's gone." The warmth of her mother's love seemed to vanish in an instant, and with it, the life Amma had known. That evening, the house, once filled with laughter, now felt cold and empty. The dinner table, usually a place where they shared stories, was silent. Amma sat there, staring at the food in front of her, but unable to eat. Kwame, too, sat across from her, his eyes distant, his mind clearly elsewhere. "You must be strong now, Amma," Kwame said in a flat tone. "Life will be different. We must move forward." His words offered no comfort, no warmth, No hint of the love that Amma had always relied on. There was only an overwhelming emptiness. Amma nodded silently, her heart heavy with grief, but inside, she felt lost. How could life go on without her mother? How could she be strong when her world had crumbled? But there was no one to turn to for comfort. Her father's coldness and his refusal to speak of her mother left Amma to navigate the storm of emotions inside her alone. Nana Efua, Amma's grandmother, had heard the news of her daughter's passing and came immediately to visit. She had loved Adwoa with all her heart, and now, seeing her granddaughter in such sorrow, broke her heart all over again. Nana Efua had lived through loss herself, too much loss, but it was nothing compared to losing a child. Her own sorrow mingled with Amma's, and she vowed to protect her granddaughter from further pain. When Nana Efua entered the house, she felt the coldness in the air. Amma sat by the window, staring out at the hills, her face expressionless. Her once bright eyes were now dull and filled with sadness. The small girl hardly seemed to notice Nana Efua's presence. "My sweet Amma," Nana Efua said softly, kneeling beside her. "How are you, my child?" Amma turned slowly, her eyes heavy with unshed tears. "I'm fine, Grandma," she whispered, though her voice trembled. It was clear she wasn't fine. How could she be? Nana Efua's heart ached as she gently wrapped her arms around Amma. She knew that words would not heal the pain, but perhaps, just perhaps, her love could offer a glimmer of hope. In the days that followed, Nana Efua came by often. She would bring Amma small gifts, perhaps a piece of cloth to brighten her spirits, or a bowl of fresh fruit to tempt her appetite. But each time she visited, it was clear that Amma was sinking deeper into her sorrow. Her small frame seemed to shrink with each passing day, and her once bright smile had completely disappeared. The light that had once shone so brightly in Amma's eyes was now a mere flicker. Nana Efua grew more concerned. She couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in her daughter's husband, Kwame. He seemed distant, cold, and indifferent to Amma's suffering. Every time Nana Efua gently tried to bring up Amma's state of mind, Kwame brushed her off, his sharp words like daggers. "She's fine," Kwame would say with a stiff tone. "You don't need to keep coming back." But Nana Efua wasn't convinced. There was something wrong, something deeper than just grief. Her granddaughter was not just mourning, she was being neglected. And the more she observed Kwame, the more she realized he was shutting down emotionally, almost as if he wanted to forget that he had ever known love. One afternoon, Nana Efua arrived at the house to find Amma sitting on the cold kitchen floor, hunched over, eating a piece of dry yam. The sight broke Nana Efua's heart. Amma had always been a lively, energetic child, full of laughter and joy. Now she seemed like a tiny, broken soul, left to fend for herself in a world that felt so cruel. "Amma, where is your food?" Nana Efua asked, her voice filled with concern. Amma looked up, her eyes rimmed with tears. "Papa said he was too busy to make it," she replied, her voice small and uncertain. Nana Efua felt a surge of anger and sadness rise within her. A child should never feel this way. No child should ever go without food, especially not Amma, who had once been so full of life. Her heart ached for her granddaughter, who was left alone to bear a grief far too heavy for her tiny shoulders. That night, Nana Efua sat in her small hut, pondering deeply. She had very little, just a small patch of land and a modest income from selling crafts. But she had love, and that, she believed, was more powerful than anything. She knew she had to protect Amma, no matter the cost. "I must do something," Nana Efua said to herself, her voice firm. "Amma needs me, and I will not turn away from her. I must find a way to keep her safe, to give her the love and care she deserves." The next morning, Nana Efua arrived at Amma's house with a plan. She would no longer stand by and watch her granddaughter suffer. She could not rely on Kwame to provide the emotional support Amma needed, and so Nana Efua decided it was time to take matters into her own hands. She gently took Amma by the hand and led her outside to the fresh air, hoping that some sunlight and nature would help lift her spirits. "Amma, let's go for a walk," Nana Efua suggested with a smile. "Let's go to the river." Amma's eyes seemed to brighten a little, though sadness still clouded her expression. But she didn't resist. As they walked, Nana Efua shared stories of the old days, of their ancestors, of their people's strength. "Amma, you come from a long line of strong women," Nana Efua said. "Your mother was one of the bravest, most loving women I have ever known. You are a part of that legacy, and you have the strength to get through this. I know you can." Amma remained silent, but listened intently, her small hand clutching Nana Efua's. There was something in her grandmother's voice, something that made her feel less alone, less afraid. Over the next few weeks, Nana Efua's presence became a lifeline for Amma. Every morning, she would arrive with a basket of fresh fruit or small trinkets she had made with her hands. She would sit with Amma, gently guiding her back into the world of joy, even if it was just for a moment. The days were still filled with sorrow, but Nana Efua's love began to create small moments of light. Amma slowly started to eat more, though she was still far from her usual lively self. She began to smile a little, not as brightly as before, but enough for Nana Efua to know her heart was healing, bit by bit. Sometimes she would sit by the river, watching the flowing water, as Nana Efua told stories of her own childhood, of the adventures she had once had, and of how the ancestors always watched over their people. Yet, despite the little victories, there were moments when Amma's grief would return, wrapping itself tightly around her heart. The nights were always the hardest. When the world grew still and the moon hung high in the sky, Amma would curl up in bed, her tiny hands clutching her blanket. She would often cry quietly in the dark, wishing her mother could return. Nana Efua would sit beside her, whispering words of comfort, holding her until the tears stopped. But there was something else in the air, something that Nana Efua couldn't ignore. Kwame's coldness seemed to grow. It was as if he had built a wall around himself, refusing to acknowledge the pain his daughter was going through. His silence was louder than words. He spent his days outside, lost in his thoughts, and his nights were consumed by work or solitude. One evening, Nana Efua decided to confront him. She knew she couldn't stand by any longer, watching as Kwame became more distant and isolated. Amma needed both of her parents. She needed love, support, and the guidance of those who cared for her. And if Kwame wasn't willing to provide that, then Nana Efua would do whatever it took. She arrived at Kwame's house just as the sun began to set. Kwame was standing outside, staring into the distance, his face expressionless. As Nana Efua approached, she could see the toll the past weeks had taken on him. He seemed older, his eyes tired, his movements slow. But what hurt Nana Efua most was the way he refused to look at her, as if he had already turned away from everything. "Kwame," she called softly, her voice steady but filled with concern. "Amma needs you. She's struggling, and I can see that you are too, but you mustn't let her suffer alone." Kwame turned to her, his face hard. "She'll be fine," he muttered, his voice cold. "You don't have to keep coming here. She has you." Nana Efua's heart clenched. "She needs more than just me, Kwame," she said firmly. "She needs you. You're her father. Don't you see that she's slipping away?" But Kwame didn't answer. Instead, he turned away and walked inside the house, leaving Nana Efua standing there, helpless and heartbroken. She knew there was nothing more she could say to him. His heart had closed off, and it seemed that no amount of love or words could open it. The following day, Nana Efua took Amma for a walk to the village market. As they walked, Amma looked around, her eyes taking in the sights of the village, the laughter of children playing, the smells of fresh food being sold. It felt like a small piece of normalcy in a world that had been turned upside down. "Grandma," Amma said quietly as they walked. "Why doesn't Papa talk to me?" Nana Efua stopped walking for a moment, her heart heavy with the truth. "Your papa is hurting, Amma," she said softly. "He is going through his own pain, and sometimes, when people are hurting, they don't know how to show love." Amma's small brow furrowed. "But I miss Mama so much," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what to do without her." Nana Efua bent down to look into Amma's eyes, her face full of warmth and understanding. "I know, my dear," she said gently. "And it's okay to miss her. It's okay to feel sad. But you have people who love you, and we will get through this together. You don't have to carry the pain alone." Amma nodded, though her face was still filled with sadness. The world seemed so big and overwhelming to such a small child. Nana Efua's words brought some comfort, but the emptiness of losing her mother was a hole that couldn't easily be filled. As they continued walking, Nana Efua saw the village head in the distance, standing near his hut with a few other villagers. A thought crossed her mind, one that had been growing in the back of her mind for days. Something wasn't right with Kwame's behavior. The way he distanced himself from Amma, the way he seemed to shut down emotionally. There was more to this situation than just grief. Nana Efua knew that the truth would eventually come to light, and when it did, it would change everything. But for now, she focused on Amma, on healing, on protecting her. She couldn't let anything or anyone harm her sweet granddaughter, not even her own father. Days passed, and the unease in the air only grew heavier. Nana Efua kept a close eye on Kwame and Amma, trying to understand the reason behind Kwame's coldness and the unsettling silence between father and daughter. But no matter how much she observed, she couldn't figure out what was causing the distance between them. Amma had always been so close to her father. Before the accident, they had laughed together, worked together, and shared their lives. One evening, as Nana Efua prepared a simple meal for Amma, she noticed something strange. Amma was sitting quietly by the window, staring out at the setting sun, her small face filled with concern. Nana Efua watched her granddaughter for a while, wondering if she was feeling the same unease that had been growing in her own heart. "Amma," Nana Efua called softly, breaking the silence. "Why don't you help me with the cooking? You used to love stirring the pot with me." Amma turned to her, her eyes distant. "Grandma, do you think Papa is angry with me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nana Efua's heart clenched, but she kept her composure. "Oh, my dear, he's not angry with you," she said, walking over and sitting beside her. He's been hurting too. Sometimes when people hurt, they don't know how to show love. It's not your fault." Amma nodded, but there was something in her eyes, something that told Nana Efua there was more to the story. "Grandma, I don't think Papa is telling me everything," Amma continued, her voice trembling. "He says Mama is gone, but I don't know if it's true." Nana Efua's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected for some time that Amma knew more than she let on, but hearing these words from the little girl's lips shook her to the core. "What do you mean, my child?" Nana Efua asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Amma hesitated, her tiny hands playing with the hem of her dress. "I saw something strange that night. I didn't understand it then, but now I think I do." Amma paused, looking up at Nana Efua with wide, fearful eyes. I think Papa didn't tell me the whole truth. He wasn't sad like he should have been." Nana Efua's heart sank. This was more than she had feared. Amma's instincts were sharp, and she had picked up on something that Nana Efua hadn't been able to put into words. "What did you see, Amma?" Nana Efua asked softly, her voice steady despite the storm that was rising inside her. Amma looked down, her fingers nervously twisting. "I saw Papa talking to someone that night. After he told me Mama was gone, he was whispering to someone in the shadows, and they were laughing. It wasn't a sad laugh. It felt wrong." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Nana Efua felt the weight of Ama's revelation settle over her, and her mind raced. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. But what kind of secret had Kwame been hiding? That night, Nana Efua couldn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking about Ama's words. If Kwame had been talking to someone in the shadows, why hadn't he mentioned it? Why did he seem so distant? She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. She had to find out the truth. The next morning, Nana Efua decided to take matters into her own hands. She would speak to the village elders. They were wise, and they might know something about Kwame's behavior that could shed light on the situation. Perhaps they had seen something, or heard something that would help her understand what was happening. As she walked to the village square, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to unfold. The air felt thick with secrets, and she couldn't ignore the sense of dread that seemed to follow her wherever she went. But she knew that she had to keep moving forward. She had to protect Ama, and she had to protect her family from whatever dark truth lay hidden in the shadows. The village elders gathered in the square, their faces marked by years of wisdom and experience. Nana Efua sat among them, her heart heavy with the burden of what she might learn. As she explained the situation, she noticed their expressions growing more serious with every word. It was clear that they, too, sensed the weight of the mystery surrounding Kwame. Nana Efua, one of the elders, an older woman named Ya, said softly, "We have seen Kwame change over the last few weeks. He has become distant, withdrawn. He no longer participates in the community as he once did." Nana Efua nodded, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. "Yes, I've noticed the same. But there's more. My granddaughter, Ama, told me something strange. She saw Kwame talking to someone in the dark, laughing. It wasn't a sad laugh, it was wrong." The elders exchanged looks, and for a moment, the square was silent. Finally, Ya spoke again, her voice grave. "It is said that sometimes, when a person is overwhelmed by guilt, they seek solace in the wrong places. They turn to dark things for comfort, and it can cloud their judgment. Kwame may have made a dangerous choice." The words hit Nana Efua like a blow. What had Kwame done? What secret was he hiding? And how deep did it go? The next day, Nana Efua gathered the courage to speak to Kwame directly. She went to his hut, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this conversation could change everything. It was time to confront him. Kwame was sitting outside, his eyes distant as always. As Nana Efua approached, he didn't even look up. "What do you want, Nana Efua?" he asked, his tone cold. Nana Efua took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Kwame, I know something is wrong. I know you've been hiding something from Ama. She deserves the truth, and so do I. Whatever it is, you can't keep it from us anymore." Kwame's face darkened. "You don't understand," he muttered, his voice low and strained. "It's not something you can fix." Nana Efua's heart raced. "Tell me, Kwame, what have you done?" For a moment there was silence. Then slowly Kwame stood up, his shoulders slumped. "I never wanted anyone to know," he whispered. "But now I see that I can't keep running from it." Kwame took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he spoke. "It's not something I'm proud of, Nana Efua. But you deserve to know the truth. Adwoa, your daughter, she didn't die in an accident." Nana Efua's heart skipped a beat. The words she had feared most echoed in her ears. She had suspected for some time that the circumstances surrounding Adwoa's death were suspicious, but hearing Kwame's admission shook her to her core. "What are you saying, Kwame?" Nana Efua whispered, her voice barely audible. "If she didn't die in an accident, then what happened?" Kwame avoided her gaze, staring at the ground as though he couldn't bear to face the weight of his own actions. "I didn't want to lose her. I couldn't," his voice cracked. "Adwoa, she found out about something I had done, something I'd been hiding for years. I didn't want her to tell anyone. I was afraid it would destroy me. Nana Afua's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of Kwame's confession. What could he have done that was so terrible? "What did you do, Kwame?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. Kwame swallowed hard, the pain in his eyes more than Nana Afua had ever seen. "I was involved in something that no one should ever be a part of. There were men, dangerous men who I owed money to. They threatened me, Nana Afua. They said that if I didn't pay them back, they would come after my family." Nana Afua's mind whirled, unable to comprehend what Kwame was saying. "But Adwa, did she know? Did she know about these men?" Kwame nodded, his face a picture of torment. "She found out. I couldn't hide it anymore. She wanted to go to the elders, tell the whole village. But I couldn't let that happen. I was too scared." His voice broke as he continued. "I begged her not to, but she refused to keep quiet. And then I did something unforgivable." Nana Afua stood motionless, horror creeping into her chest as she realized what he was implying. "Kwame, what did you do?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. For a long moment, Kwame didn't speak. Then slowly, he raised his eyes to meet Nana Afua's. I took her life." Nana Afua staggered back as though struck by a physical blow. The words were too much to bear, too impossible to understand. "You killed her?" she whispered, the grief in her voice almost too heavy to carry. Kwame's face crumpled with regret. "I didn't mean to, Nana Afua. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. She was going to ruin everything, and I couldn't let her. I didn't know how to make her understand that." The room seemed to close in on Nana Afua as the weight of Kwame's confession pressed down on her. How could this man, her son-in-law, the father of her granddaughter, have done something so terrible? "You've destroyed everything, Kwame," Nana Afua said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've destroyed Ama's life." Kwame collapsed to his knees, his hands gripping the earth beneath him. I know I've ruined everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I couldn't keep lying to you. I couldn't lie to Ama anymore. She deserves to know the truth." The next day, Ama overheard the conversation. She had been playing outside when she heard voices rising from her father's hut. At first, she didn't pay much attention, but then she heard her name, Ama's name, and she stopped in her tracks, drawn to the sound. Her small feet took her closer, and as she peeked through a crack in the door, she saw Nana Afua and her father, Kwame, in the middle of a heated conversation. Ama's eyes widened as she heard the words she had never imagined her father would speak. "You killed Mama?" Ama whispered to herself, her tiny voice filled with confusion and fear. "Papa killed Mama?" Her heart raced as the reality of what she had overheard began to sink in. This couldn't be true. Her father, her papa, was a good man, wasn't he? He couldn't have done something so terrible. And yet, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit. The sadness in his eyes, the way he never smiled anymore, the way he kept looking over his shoulder. Ama backed away from the door, trembling. She had to understand. She couldn't keep living in the dark. She needed to know if it was true, if the man she had loved and trusted for her entire life had really taken her mother's life. That night, Ama couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her small bed, unable to quiet the thoughts that raced through her mind. The room felt suffocating, the shadows of the night pressing in on her. The weight of her father's secret was too much for her small shoulders to bear. At first light, Ama decided she had to confront her father. She had to hear the truth from his own lips, no matter how painful it might be. As Ama walked into the hut the next morning, she saw her father sitting by the fire, his face hidden in his hands. He didn't look up when she entered, but Ama didn't hesitate. "Papa," she said softly, her voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. "Is it true? Did you really kill Mama?" Kwame looked up, his face pale and strained. "Ama, I didn't want you to know. I wanted to protect you from the pain." His voice broke as he spoke. "But you deserve the truth. Yes, I took her life. I couldn't let her ruin everything I had worked for." Amma's heart shattered at the words. "But why, Papa? Why didn't you love her? Why didn't you tell the truth?" she asked, her voice a mix of anger and heartbreak. Kwame's eyes filled with tears. "I loved her more than anything, Amma. But fear made me do something terrible." Amma stood there for a long time, her small hands trembling. The weight of her father's betrayal seemed too much to bear. Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever look at him the same way again? The silence that followed was deafening. Amma had always looked up to her father, but now he was a stranger. The village was rocked by the revelation. Word spread quickly, and the elders called an emergency gathering. Nana Ifua had no choice but to speak up, to share the truth with the rest of the village. Amma's bravery in confronting her father had exposed the dark secret that had haunted their family for so long. As the village came together, the shock and outrage were palpable. The betrayal, the loss, the broken trust. They would take time to heal. But Amma's courage, her strength in the face of overwhelming darkness, became a beacon of hope for everyone who heard her story. Kwame was forced to face the consequences of his actions, and while the road ahead would be long and painful, the truth was finally out. Amma's journey was just beginning. She would have to learn how to rebuild her life, how to trust again, and how to forgive, if she ever could. But one thing was certain. She was no longer a little girl in a world of secrets. She was a survivor. Amma's life was forever changed. The day after her father's confession, she stood before the elders, trembling but resolute. Her small figure seemed so fragile, yet the strength in her eyes was undeniable. Amma had always been the kind of child who kept her emotions inside. But now, with her world shattered, she had no choice but to face the truth. Both the truth about her father and the truth about herself. The village square was filled with murmurs. The elders sat in a large circle, and the villagers gathered around, their faces full of shock and disbelief. They had never imagined that the man they had once respected could be capable of such a crime. Amma's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped forward, holding her grandmother's hand tightly. Nana Ifua was by her side, her face lined with sorrow and pain. "Amma," she whispered softly, "you don't have to do this if you're not ready." But Amma shook her head, her small voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. "No, Grandma. I need to speak. I need them to know the truth." Kwame was nowhere to be seen. He had been taken away by the elders to face the consequences of his actions. Amma couldn't bring herself to look in his direction. The pain of betrayal was too fresh. How could she look at the man who had raised her, who had been her protector, now that she knew the truth of his darkness? "Amma," the village elder, Elder Kojo, said softly, "you are very brave for standing before us today. We are all here to listen, and we will stand by you as you walk this difficult path." Amma nodded but didn't speak right away. Her mind was racing, filled with 1,000 questions. She had never imagined that her father, the man who had always been her hero, could hurt her mother so deeply. How could she reconcile this version of her father with the man who had been so kind to her? Finally, after a long silence, Amma took a deep breath and spoke. "I want to know why. Why did Papa do it? Why couldn't he just tell the truth?" Her voice wavered with the weight of her emotions. "I don't understand. I loved him, and I loved Mama. I just don't know how to live without her." The villagers were quiet, listening intently. Elder Kojo exchanged a look with the other elders before speaking. "Amma, what you're asking is something only your father can answer fully. But know this, what happened was wrong, and your father will face the consequences. But this is also a time for healing, for finding the path to peace." Amma's heart clenched at his words. Healing. How could she heal from this? How could she ever forgive the man who had taken her mother's life? As the days passed, Amma became more withdrawn. She spent most of her time with Nana Efua, retreating into the safety of her grandmother's arms. Nana Efua's love and kindness were a small comfort, but they couldn't fill the empty space where her mother's love had once been. In the quiet moments of her grief, Amma found herself often staring at the moon. It had always been a place of comfort for her and her mother. Under its light, Adwoa had told her stories of their ancestors, of warriors and queens, of the strength of the people who had come before them. Now, those stories felt distant, like something from another world. But one night, as Amma sat under the moon, something within her shifted. She remembered her mother's words, the ones that had always filled her with warmth and hope. Amma, remember this. No matter how dark the night may seem, the dawn will always come. Your heart is your strength. The dawn did come, but not in the way Amma had expected. It came in the form of a decision. Her decision. Amma decided to face her father. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she knew that it was the only way she could find peace. She needed to hear the truth from him directly. No longer was she the little girl who depended on her father's love. She was growing up, and she would take control of her own story. Amma stood outside the elder's hut, her heart pounding in her chest. She was nervous but determined. With each step toward the hut, she could feel her fear ebbing away, replaced by the quiet strength she had inherited from her mother and grandmother. When she entered the hut, Kwame was sitting alone, his face buried in his hands. He didn't look up at first. Amma took a deep breath before speaking. "Papa," she said softly, "I need to understand." Kwame lifted his head, his eyes red and swollen from crying. "Amma," his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could take back what I did, but I can't. I didn't know what else to do. I was so afraid of losing everything I had." Amma stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm in her heart. "You could have told the truth, Papa. You didn't have to kill Mama. You didn't have to make everything so broken." Kwame nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know. I was wrong, Amma, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make things right, even if you never forgive me." Amma stood silently for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. Could she forgive him? Could she ever look at him the same way again? The questions lingered, but for the first time since her mother's death, she felt something else. A small flicker of peace. "Papa," Amma said quietly, "I can't forgive you yet, but I'll try. For Mama." Kwame's face crumpled with emotion, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, Amma. Thank you for being strong." The village began to heal. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But with Amma's bravery, the community came together. The elders had been right. This was a time for healing. Kwame faced the elders, and they decided that he would be exiled from the village to seek redemption. It was the harshest punishment they could impose, but it was also a chance for him to rebuild his life. Amma stayed with Nana Efua, and together they found strength in each other. Amma slowly began to smile again, though the ache in her heart never fully disappeared. She carried her mother's memory with her, and as time passed, she learned to honor her mother's spirit by living a life of kindness and courage. Amma's journey was not an easy one, but she had learned the most important lesson of all, that even in the darkest of times, a small spark of courage can light the way. Her journey of healing had only just begun, but with each passing day, she grew stronger, more resilient. And in time, the people of the village would remember her not only as the little girl who had faced the truth, but as the young woman who had helped the village heal and find peace once again. If Amma's story of courage and resilience has touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others who need to hear this powerful message. Every child deserves love, safety, and a voice, And by spreading stories like Amma's, we can inspire change and hope. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more heartwarming and impactful stories like this. Together, let's give a voice to those who need it the most.